All right, welcome everybody. So this is going to be PowerShell for the DBA. It's an introduction to PowerShell for DBAs. So most of this session is going to be demos, and we're going to be showing how PowerShell works, some basics of PowerShell, and basically showing then how to access SQL Server and come up with a useful script at the end that kind of ties it all together and gets us a layout of our environment. So first, a quick little introduction about me. My name is Josh Owen. I'm a senior BI consultant at Pragmatic Works. My social media links there are on the right, so you can reach me at Twitter at SQLJosh. I just recently started blogging again, so my blog is bitsbyteswords.com, and there's also a link to my LinkedIn profile there. All right, so our agenda today is demos, more demos, and demos. This is a very demo-heavy session, so we'll be actually just diving into PowerShell, showing you the scripts, showing you how things work. There are a few slides in here, so it's not just all demos. We'll be covering some just basics of what is PowerShell, what is piping in PowerShell. We'll be covering WMI because we'll be accessing some computer information, and WMI is how we do that in PowerShell. And then finally, I've kind of broken my demo into various sections. We'll have commandlets, variable strings. We'll cover how to do logic, so if, else, loops, functions, those kind of things. We'll cover the SQL PS module and the SMO, which is the SQL management object. Those are both different ways to access SQL Server. So it's kind of a preference on which way you want to use, so we'll just kind of show you how to do both. And finally, like I mentioned, we'll tie it all together in an inventory script that will kind of tie bits of SQL Server, bits of WMI together, and produce an Excel file that will kind of document our environment. All right, so next slide is what is PowerShell? So for those of you that are new to PowerShell, it's basically a Microsoft scripting environment. It includes a command line shell and also an integrated scripting environment, which is kind of an IDE. We'll be mostly using the IDE just because it's easier to demo, but you can just use a command line shell to run scripts and stuff as well. A lot of Microsoft components have tie-ins to PowerShell. So things like SQL Server, Microsoft Office, WMI, SCOM, all those things have interfaces they expose to PowerShell, which makes it very useful to tie pieces together between the different components. So our final script will actually be tying together stuff from SQL Server. We'll be using Office because we'll be generating an Excel file, and we'll also be using WMI to get system information. All right, where do you get PowerShell? So if you do not have PowerShell currently installed in your system, you can just do a search for Windows Management Framework 4.0 on the Microsoft Download Center. PowerShell does come embedded in operating systems nowadays, although depending on your operating system, you may have an older version of PowerShell. So if you're kind of on a baseline Windows 7 or Server 2008 R2, for instance, it would have PowerShell 2.0. Newer operating systems like Windows 8.1, Windows Server 2012 SP1, for instance, would have 4.0. And currently, 5.0 is currently in preview. I believe it's been in preview since last April. It's not quite out yet. So all the demos I'll be doing today will be with 4.0. All right, so some very basic PowerShell commands that are really important are get help and get command. Those are probably the two most commonly ones used when you're exploring PowerShell. Basically, they will get you a little help file on a command that you're not familiar with. You can kind of search the different commands. So when you're exploring a new module or you just want to know what you can get from PowerShell, those two are very helpful. In my demos, I'll be showing how you can use these also to get like detailed information on parameters and stuff like that. So piping. So piping is a concept in PowerShell that lets you basically run a command in kind of a mini loop. So if you put a pipe on the right side of an object, it'll basically run what's on the left side for each time that that pipe matches something. So in some of the examples here, for instance, that get service, where object name like update. So basically every object name like update that it matches is going to use the get service, and then you can also throw another pipe, and then for each of those it's going to run the stop service. So it's kind of a powerful way to create many loops without actually having to create a loop. and we'll definitely show you how to use pipes. And finally, the Windows Management Instrumentation, so WMI. So we'll be using WMI a little bit in our final script, but basically it's a database of information that Windows keeps about the operating system in the system. If you've ever gone to like your System Information tab in Windows, all that information about your hardware, your devices, the operating system, your RAM, hard disk, all that is exposed and available there. So basically we'll be using that to grab system information from our SQL servers and combining that with actual information we get from SQL itself. All right, so we're going to jump into the demos. Like I said, the first 50% of these demos are the intro level stuff to PowerShell. So we'll be covering commandlets, variables, logic loops, and then the last 50% will be how to use it for SQL Server and then how to use it for WMI and tying all that together. Just give me 1 second to bring up my ISE. All right, so this is the Windows PowerShell ISE. It's basically, like I said, an IDE version of PowerShell. I like it for demo purposes because at the top here we can see our scripts. Then at the bottom, you can kind of see the output of our scripts. So we're just going to kind of run through these scripts. In the interest of time, I'll probably be skipping some of the sections. I'll show you or explain to you what they do. But this demo does run a little tight on time sometimes, so we'll just get to the relevant sections. So the first thing we'll do is get command. So I'm going to highlight that. That's a commandlet. And if I run that, you'll see that it output a really long list of commands. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of these, but basically if you have PowerShell installed and you have modules installed and you want to see what commands are available on your system, it's a good way to kind of just get a master list. You can also use a parameter for .verb or -verb and -noun. These are basically ways to filter the list. You'll notice that all these are written in kind of a verb-noun format, so set strict mode or update service or get something. So you can either filter by the verb, we'll run that. So you see we all get all the gets on the before the dash there, or you can filter on the noun. And you'll see here we get all the service-related options. So it's a good way to kind of prune down that list. So if you want to get specific help on a specific command, use the get help commandlet. So if we kind of get meta here and get help on get command, you'll see that we get basically a breakdown of the name of the command. We'll get the syntax, and that's probably the most important part. That's the parameters that you can pass in there. You get a nice little description with a link usually.